So I want to talk about a few issues with the Neil Young, Joe Rogan, and Spotify situation. There's three things that I want to talk about. One emotion that we lack, misinformation, and something that really, really frustrates me about this entire situation. But before we get into it, what frustrates you? What is the thing that just irks you the most about this whole conversation? Let me know in the comments. If you don't know who I am, I'm Burt Byler. Here on the channel, I'm making Celebrate Americana music. So if that's something that you're into, please hit that like and subscribe button. It would really help me out since the algorithm's been whipping my behind recently. All right, let's get into it. And before I do, I just want to say that this is a very touchy subject. This is a very sensitive subject because we are talking roundaboutly about a situation where a lot of people have died. Now, don't all you conspiracy folks coming at me talking about COVID deaths and all that. Don't just, guys, let's just try to have this conversation with a little nuance, with a little bit of respect. So if you don't know what's going on, I'm going to give you a little spiel on what's been happening. Neil Young, who I'm a massive Neil Young fan. I've been trying to finish. I'm not very good at finishing books, but the first half that I've read is fantastic. And I'm also not a huge Joe Rogan fan. I'm going to throw that out. I know most of my audience is like 95% white male, and there's a lot of Joe Rogan fans in my audience. I'm personally not a big fan. If you are, that's fine, but we're going to talk about what's been going on. So let me pull up this article real quick. So Neil Young demands that Spotify remove his music over false information about vaccines. This is from Rolling Stone, by the way, if you can't see it on the top. They can have Joe Rogan or Young, or they can have Rogan or Young. Neil Young wrote in a letter to his manager and label, not both. So basically, Neil Young was saying, you got to pick me or you got to pick Rogan. Now, for those of you who don't know who Joe Rogan is, which is probably nobody, he's arguably has the biggest podcast in the world. He's a comedian, UFC fight commentator. That's the word I'm looking for. And he does a lot of interviews with a lot of people. I believe he does 4 interviews a week. And we're going to talk a little bit about how I feel about him and some things that I think we can talk about. But one thing that I do want to talk about is Neil Young. And the thing that I feel like we lack these days, and that is the emotion of empathy. Now, if you know anything about Neil Young, you would know that Neil Young battled polio when he was a kid. He, in this book that I'm reading right now, it says, by the way, this is from Consequence of Sound. He was diagnosed with polio in here, let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. He was diagnosed with polio. Where'd it go? Did I lose it? Here we go. In 1951, and spent time in Toronto's Sick Children's Hospital as he battled the life-threatening disease. He ultimately recovered, though the disease left him with a limp. So in most times in life, when somebody has a major battle with something, we tend to be pretty graceful. So if you know that your family member has really battled with a situation, whenever they talk about it, we tend to show empathy and show grace. So first off, Neil Young has a history of battling a disease, and he's a pro-vaccine guy. He said on his website, I was vaccinated for polio at my school in Canada. Nothing new about vaccines. They've been there for a long time. Like me, trust science. So let's just go on ahead and throw it out there that he's a polio survivor. And I think that has a lot to do maybe with his take on this. Can we not have a little empathy for Neil Young and his situation? I don't think that's too much to ask. Now, Joe Rogan, just signed a alleged $100 million deal with Spotify. This is from the Wall Street Journal. His full library dating back 11 years is to hit the service September 1st. This was last year, by the way. I believe it was either 2020 or 2021. Y'all let me know in the comments. And become exclusive to Spotify after that before the end of the year. So Neil Young tells Spotify, you either have to get rid of Rogan or get rid of me. And Neil Young knows that Spotify just paid him $100 million to bring him to the service. So, in my opinion, he knew that Spotify was never going to get rid of Rogan. They just spent so much money on him, and it makes you beg and ask the question of how, I don't want to ask how sincere this is. I don't want to ask, where his heart is on that stuff. But it doesn't take a genius to know that whenever he laid down that gauntlet, that Spotify was always going to pick Joe Rogan. I think that's an interesting point. Also, let's see. Let me check out my notes for anything. Also, I want to just throw out that I respect anybody that is willing to put their money where their mouth is and fight for what they believe in. So regardless of the fact that he has a lot of money and he can afford to do this, unlike most of the musicians that we listen to on this channel, I'm always down for somebody fighting for what they believe in, regardless if I don't agree or I do agree with how they go about doing it. I wish we had more people standing up for stuff that they believe in these days. So props to Neil Young. Okay. Also, a couple of more people. Joni Mitchell has also removed her music from Spotify, and Niles Lofgren, who plays with the E Street Band, guitar player, has also moved his music. So it's not just Neil, but he's kind of started it. And then Neil has also kind of started this wave of people wanting to cancel Spotify. Imagine if people cancel Spotify because they don't pay musicians enough money. Can we not get around that? Is that not something we can all come together around? Okay, so that brings us to the next topic, which is misinformation. Now, I think where you draw the line at the end of the day comes down to how you feel about misinformation, how you feel that should be handled, and whose job is it to handle it. So Joe Rogan is pretty notorious for having some pretty fringe voices on the topics that he talks about. Now, yes, I do believe that he does hear multiple sides of the argument, but let's be honest, most of the people that come on his show that talk about things tend to be on one side of the aisle, and very rarely he has somebody on the other side of the aisle. I wish it would be more balanced, but that's just my opinion. Now, I'm not a big Joe Rogan fan. I don't necessarily find his comedy very funny. I find some of his interviews to be interesting, but for the most part, it's not my thing, and I just want to make that known. I'm not a big Joe Rogan fan. I've not listened to a ton of his interviews. I'm not a deep fan of Joe Rogan, just to let that be known. But the question comes down to, one, do you believe the interviews that he's having is promoting misinformation, in which I would argue, in my humble opinion, I'm not a health expert, I'm a musician, and I teach Spanish to 12-year-olds. So you should stop this video, because I'm not the one to talk about health stuff. But do I think he has some pretty extreme people come on his podcast and spew some pretty stupid stuff? Yeah, I do. I think some of it's pretty ridiculous. I think Alex Jones is kind of the great example of how extreme the opinions that he has on his show. But so on one hand, I do believe that he is promoting disinformation, misinformation, that's also such a gray word. Like, my next point is, even if he is promoting misinformation, which you will find a lot of different opinions on whether or not that is the case, I just gave you my opinion on it, doesn't mean that it's fact. Then what are you asking to be done, Mr. Young? And then also, who gets to decide what misinformation is? Basically, what Neil Young is doing is he's asking a for-profit tech company, which is Spotify, to decide what information is correct and what information is not correct. Who wants Spotify making any of those decisions? Spotify has been shitting on us musicians the entire time that it has been around. You want Facebook making these decisions? Really? Really? Do you want YouTube to be making these decisions? Who gets to be the ministry of truth? Who gets to decide that? I would love to hear y'all's opinions on that, because if you want to try to get someone deplatformed, I just don't think it's the best way to go about it. I'm more of a fan of let's battle it out in the arena of ideas, or the market of ideas. I wish Neil Young would have gone on his podcast and had a conversation with him about this stuff. That's just my opinion. You can take it how you want. But I don't agree with the plan of trying to deplatform people when we are talking about things that are very, very highly debated. Whether or not you want to agree with these people or not, medical decisions are debated things. Now, don't you just wish there was a right answer always? It's kind of like, I don't want to compare it to like going to the doctor, but it's very common to get a second opinion on a medical procedure. It's very common that if you don't like what this doctor says, maybe you can go check out another doctor and see what they say. I just don't understand how we got to the point where like decisions on health became so black and white. I've never seen it to be so black and white. I think all the time we debate what people should do. And I just feel like we're becoming so tribal these days, and so this side and that side. This side's right, this side's wrong. And I fall into it myself as well. Okay, I'm not trying to say that I'm perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But I just wish that there was a little bit more debate and a little bit more nuance when it comes to this situation. And I don't want to tell Neil Young what to do. He can do what he wants. This is his music. This is his life. But those are my 2 cents on it. But now I want to talk about what frustrates me the most. The thing that just boils my blood. So this whole situation started off with being a Neil Young versus Joe Rogan talking about misinformation, etc. He laid down the gauntlet, Spotify responds and removes his music. Okay, that's kind of like the main topic. But just like every argument that happens on the internet, it starts to take life, and there's roots and branches that starts to go around. And I'm seeing people on Twitter trying to get Oh Boy Records, who was started by John Prine, who died of COVID complications, to get them to remove the catalogs from Spotify. Like, how low of people do we have to become to where when a man who is so loved and revered in the Americana and country community dies of something, and fans feel like they have the right to tell his family members what to do? It blows my mind. And also, other fans that are preaching at musicians and telling them that they should remove their catalogs from Spotify. How dare you? Musicians just went through two of the hardest years possibly in the history of music. The pandemic has wrecked musicians. Most of them are getting jobs elsewhere. They can't tour. They can't make a living like maybe they used to a few years ago. And first off, the reason that Spotify and these places exist is because fans stopped buying music. So because fans stopped buying music, we had to focus on streaming. And now that we're focusing so much on streaming, which, by the way, doesn't pay us anything. You know what Spotify pays? Spotify pays 0.003 cents on the low end. So if you multiply that times, say, an artist in our genre has 100,000 reproductions on Spotify on a song, they make $300. Now, 100,000 streams is a lot for people in our genre. It's incredible. If you get 1 million and you get lucky, you're going to have $3,000. And y'all want us to take that down too? Do y'all support us or not? The fact that fans are trying to call out musicians to remove one of the few revenue streams that we still have these days blows my mind, and it's shameful. Shameful. It breaks my heart. How dare some of you tell Oh Boy Records what they should do with their catalogs? How dare y'all? Can we not have some nuance? Can we not have some empathy these days for people? Can we not talk about issues with desiring for people to be canceled? Can we not disagree with someone and at the same time not demand that these pro-tech companies or these huge tech companies deplatform people? Now, do I think there's exceptions to the rule? Absolutely. I think hate speech and I think threats and lots of terrible things that can happen on the internet, that's a whole different conversation. But when we're talking about things that are so highly debatable as healthcare issues, now I wish they weren't so highly debatable. I wish it was a lot easier. But let's fight it out in the market of ideas. Stop telling musicians to remove the small bit of revenue that they have. And this is where I wanted to get to. Musicians need your support. Now more than ever, they're playing empty rooms. They're trying to do the same things that they used to do that isn't working like it used to work. So please, from the bottom of my heart, go support musicians. I have a video on my channel. I'll put in the link in the description below after I edit this down on the best ways to support musicians. In my opinion, if a musician has a Patreon, that's the best way to support them. Or a monthly membership. Also, when they do live music on the internet, give donations. That music goes directly to them. If it's a PayPal link, they get to keep almost all of that. Then you can get it down to touring and merch and all that kind of stuff. But please, musicians are hurting. We need your help. And for the love of all things that are holy, let's have a little bit more empathy in our life. Let's learn to disagree without the need for deplatforming and canceling. That's my 2 cents on it. I hope any of that made sense. I love y'all. Fans of music, I love you. But we have got to stop being so tribal. And we have got to stop being so one side or the other side. I'm normally on the Neil Young side, the Margot Price, like that's normally the people that I agree with. I just personally believe that this is just a little wild for me. And that's just my opinion. I want to hear what y'all have to say. I want to hear y'all's opinion. That's why I made this video. If you enjoyed this at all, hit that like and subscribe button. I don't normally make videos like this, but I'm going to start trying to talk about more things that are going on in the country and Americana music world. So hitting that like and subscribe button would really help me out. Let me know what I missed. What am I missing? I'm here to learn. I want to hear from y'all. I want to know what's going on. So please let me know, and I'll see you somewhere on down the river.